122. We're starting a new Perek from Gimel. That was a long Perek Mem Beis. Just an interesting piece of trivia. We have, I told you in the past that there's also a sefer printed called Mahadura Kama of Tanya, which means the original, the first version, the first edition of Tanya. And there are different changes made in it. And one of the changes that was made was that Perek Mem Beis used to be two prakim. And the Rebbe, for whatever reason, consolidated into one Perek. It's the only Perek that in the Madura Kama in the first edition was two, and then it was consolidated into one. So it was a long Perek Mem Beis. And now we're ready for Perek Mem Gimel. The next few prakim are a little shorter. But let's first recap where we are. So the larger topic over here is Yiras Hashem. We've talked about Yiras Hashem for the last two prakim, Perek Mem Aleph and Perek Mem Beis. Although in Perek Mem Aleph we took a little break, to talk about Avos Hashem, but most of the Perek Mem Aleph and the entire Perek Mem Beis talked about Yiras Hashem. And in terms of the major points that we made in Perek Mem Aleph and Perek Mem Beis are as follows. Just to recap. Number one, Yiras Hashem is absolutely indispensable. Now that doesn't seem to be like a big chiddush. We all know that we have to have Yiras Hashem. But with the Alter Rebbe, the chiddush of the Alter Rebbe, and the point of the Alter Rebbe is that most people think that the reason why you have to have Yiras Hashem is similar to what it says in Pirkei Avos, that Maire shal malchus ish Yisrael chaim b'loi, that we have to fear the government, we have to have a healthy respect and reverence for the government, because otherwise there would be utter anarchy and chaos, right? So people have the same impression that Yiras Hashem, why do I have to have Yiras Hashem? Because if I didn't fear Hashem, then I wouldn't be doing mitzvahs, and I would do averis. I have nothing what to fear. So therefore, I have to have Yiras Hashem. Comes along the Alter Rebbe, and we learned from the Alter Rebbe says no. I mean that's true, but that's missing the point. Yira is reishis ha'avoda v'ikra v'sharshar. Yira is the beginning of everything. It's the beginning of avoda, and it's always necessary to have Yiras Hashem, even when it comes. Even if you're about to do a mitzvah and you're very happy to do the mitzvah, and you have an ava for Hashem and you're excited and you're passionate and enthusiastic about doing the mitzvah, you still need to have Yiras Hashem. You still need to take a moment to think about Yiras Hashem before you do the mitzvah, as we learned in Perek Mem Aleph. And the reason why is because without Yira, then the mitzvah is not like an eved. You're missing the avodah element, or in Chassidic terminology, you're missing the bittul element. You're doing it's because of your own yeshus, it's because of your own desire. I want to do the mitzvah, it's about me. And ultimately we have to be an eved of Hashem, and to be an eved means to do something because Hashem commanded us to do so, and that means doing it with a yira. I'm doing it because Hashem is my melech, and because I have to do it because Hashem is my melech. So that was big point number one that the Alter Rebbe made, is that yira is absolutely essential, even if I can get by without yira theoretically. And I would do all the mitzvahs, and I would stay away from averis without yira, because I love Hashem so much. But yira is still a necessary component, and without it, you're missing the foundation. The kedusha of the mitzvah is conditional upon the yira, upon the bittul with which the mitzvah is performed, or with which the Torah is learned. That's point number one. Point number two. Point number two is how do we arrive at yira? And so the Alter Rebbe says that's through his hisbonenus. We need das. We need hisbonenus and we need das. You need to contemplate, and there were several different types of hisbonenus the Alter Rebbe spoke about. He spoke about the idea of contemplating V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, how Hashem is standing upon you and is waiting for you to do a mitzvah. That's one hisbonenus. There's the very simple hisbonenus of ayin roya isn't shemas, Pasha's understanding that Hashem is watching every single thing that you're doing. And then in the last Perek we discussed some other ideas, especially last week we spoke about this hisbonenus that wherever you look around, seeing Hashem everywhere and within everything. So there are different types of hisbonenus. So how do we arrive at Yira? Yira is arrived through hisbonenus. Da es alokei avicha v'avdeyu b'leiv shalom. If you want to serve Hashem b'leiv shalom, with your heart, and Yira is an emotion related to the leiv, related to the heart. So if you want to serve Hashem, excuse me, with the heart, avodah of the leiv, that requires that requires understanding Hashem, thinking about Hashem, and connecting to it. So that's the way to arrive at hisbonenus, to arrive at Yiras Hashem, is through hisbonenus. That was point number two. And point number three is that everyone has to understand that this is within our ability to do this. It's within our ability to contemplate the greatness of Hashem and to arrive at Yira. and to arrive at das, and through that to arrive at yira. And why is that? Because every single one of us, our neshama, receives the capacity for das, which means the idea of connection, to be able to connect with the ideas which we think about, because every single one of us, our neshama, has a yanika. It receives energy and a special type of das from the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu. So those are the 3 points. I mean, obviously there was a lot more, but those are the 3 major points discussed regarding Yira in Perek Mem Aleph and Perek Mem Beis. And now we're going to start Perek Mem Gimel. It says the Alter Rebbe Perek Mem Gimel, page 122. V'hinei al Yira Tata, regarding this Yira, which, as we'll see in this Perek, everything that we discussed up until now is called Yira Tata, is the lower level of Yira. Shehi L'kiyum mitzvaysav yizbarach, and the purpose of this lower level of Yira is in order to do the mitzvahs properly, bebechinas sur meira, staying away from that which is wrong, v'asei toiv, and doing that which is proper. So regarding this Yira that we've discussed up until now, Amru, Chazal tell us, im ein Yira ein chachma. So this is one of the enigmatic Mishnahs in Pirkei Avos, where it says, im ein Yira ein chachma, im ein chachma ein Yira. If there is no fear, there is no wisdom, and if there is no wisdom, there is no fear. And if you read this on a very simple level, it seems to be the ultimate catch-22. There is no wisdom without fear, there is no fear without wisdom. So where do I start? I want to start by attaining fear. I can't, because I need chachma first. So I want, in order to get im ein chachma in yira, right? If there is no wisdom, there is no fear. So therefore, I want to get fear. So I'll start with wisdom. But I can't get wisdom because I don't have fear, so I'll get fear. We can keep on going for the entire year like this. It's the ultimate catch-22. It's like what they say about making money. You need money in order to make money. That's all. It's a catch-22. If you need money in order to make money, so where do you start? So what does this mean? So now the Rebbe is going to explain in our Perek, it's not a catch-22. We're talking about 2 different levels of yira. So im ein yira ein chachma means if you don't have a basic level of yira, what's called yira tata, the lower level of yira ein chachma. There is no Torah mitzvahs. But ultimately you need chachma in order to achieve yira, which is a higher level of yira, what's called yira ilah, and that's what's going to be the discussion in our Perek. So until now we were talking about the lower level of yira, what's called yira tata. The definition of that we'll get to in a moment. And the purpose of Yira Tata is simply to be able to do Torah mitzvahs properly with a bittul to Hashem. And without that, there's nothing. As mentioned in the beginning of Perek Mem Aleph, Yira is the foundation of everything. So without Yira, the whole idea of Chachma, of the Chachma Satorah mitzvahs doesn't exist. You have to start with a very basic Yira. I am Hashem's Eved, and I fear Hashem, and I'm doing that which He wants me to do. V'yesh ba b'chinas katnus u'b'chinas gadlus. Within Yira Tata, there's a lower level and a higher level. So this makes it a little more complicated. There's Yira Tata and there's Yira Ilah. There's a lower level of Yira and a higher level of Yira. And within Yira Tata itself, there's Katnus and Gadlus. There's what you call a lower level, a smaller level, and a larger level. And let's take a moment just to talk about, give a very basic introduction to the idea of Yira Ilah and Yira Tata. As you will see, Yira Tata comes from meditating upon Hashem's greatness as it relates to the world. That's Yira Tata. And Yira Ilah is meditating or being able to somehow experience and feel and relate to Hashem's greatness, which is completely beyond and completely transcends the world. And it's not only a matter of the type of meditation that leads you there, but as we see as we go on, it's a different type of yira. That when your yira of Hashem is based on the yir's beinunus, your contemplation of Hashem's greatness as it relates to worlds and creation, it's one type of yira. And when your yira is a yira ilah, which means that you arrive at it from a different way, you're thinking about Hashem Himself, that's called a different yira. It's called yira ilah. It's also known as yari boishes, or Yiras Harememus. It's a different type of Yira. We'll get there in a moment. Now, when we're talking about the Yira, for the next little while, we're going to focus on Yira Tata, on the lower level of Yira Tata, on the lower level of Yira. So within the lower level of Yira, remember we said there's Katnus and there's Gandlus. What is Katnus? What is the lower level within Yirat Hata? The lower level within Yirat Hata is when your Yira comes from focusing on Hashem's relationship with this world. With this world. The fact that Hashem is present in this world, and that Hashem is watching me over here in this world, and that I look around me and everything that I see, the mountains and the rivers and the oceans and the trees and everything, I see Hashem everywhere, and I see the Yad Hashem everywhere. That's all within Yirat Hata. Thank you. Within Yirat Hata, that's the lower level of Yirat Hata. But Yirat Hata also has a bechinas gadlus. It has a higher level. And what is that? Tahainu k'shenimshach has bechinas yirazu. When do we have the higher level of Yirat Hata? When the Yira comes, mi'ez beinunus b'gdulas Hashem. When you think into the greatness of Hashem, but not only as Hashem relates to this world, but as Hashem relates to all the worlds. You contemplate the fact that Hashem fills all the worlds. And the Gemara says in Chagiga, the Gemara says in Chagiga, Tzanagadata, it says like this. The Gemara says that Ma'adis l'Rakia, how distant is the earth from the heaven? So it says Mahalach Takshana Chulu. It's 500-year distance. In other words, if you were to walk 500 years straight without rest, you would hit the heavens, you'd hit the sky. Now, that is only, so we have to, I guess at this point we have to stop and make it clear, we're not talking here about, but it's interesting that you have the concept in science, the idea of light years, right? So that space is measured by speed. Right? So we have that in the Gemara already here. The measuring of space by speed, but not the speed of light, the speed of a human being walking. But the concept already exists in the Gemara. How far is the heaven? Instead of giving, so you can make a cheshbon, because according to halacha, you can walk 4 mil in a mile, and then there's 4 mil in an hour. You can make a cheshbon exactly the distance, but that's not the point. The point is we're talking obviously about spiritual ideas, and whatever the rakia represents, it's 500 years or levels removed from the aretz, from this world. And then the Gemara says, "Ubein rakia l'rakia chulu." The Gemara says that we know there are 7 heavens, the Shiva Rakim. Again, we're talking spiritual terms. So from one heaven to the next is also 500 years, a 500-year distance. The Gemara also says over there that the thickness of every heaven is 500 years. And then the Gemara says, Ragli hachayis keneged kulan v'chulu. That on top of the 7 heavens, the Gemara says, that's where you have the malachim that are called the chayis. And the chayis, their feet, and when we say their feet, we don't mean their legs, we mean just the feet. It's keneged kulan, is the equivalent of them all. So if you're going to take
3,500.
More because the 7 heavens, and in between every single heaven, right?
And how thick is the heavens?
Each one also 500 years.
Oh, I mean the thickness also.
Right. So I'm not a mathematician over here. It's not why I was. Not that why they brought me in.
6,000-7,000.
Okay, but then we say what? That the feet of the malachim called chayis, they are the equivalent. And he says b'chulu, because actually the Gemara continues. The Gemara says karsuli achayis.
What's that?
The ankles of the chayis is keneged kulan. That means everything all combined. Also, in other words, the heavens plus the feet. Now, what does this mean to us? This means to tell us that we have to understand just how small our world is. Just how small and how many levels there are above the world, and how insignificant our world is. The entire world is compared to the feet of one malach, which combines everything. Is the size of everything combined. Again, we're talking spiritual stature. So the and the same thing when you think about how all the worlds chain down. Lamaila above. Lamaila, maila, above, adruma mailas, how many infinite worlds there are. And when a person thinks about this, and this leads to a yiras Hashem, understanding the incredible grandeur and greatness of Hashem, you think into this world and how amazing this world is, and how intricate the world is. And
You don't have to think. You need a telescope. You take a look at the constellations. That's
David says,
infinite.
Kiera Shamecha.
You can what? You have
Yeah,
to,
but you don't.
have
But
to contemplate
that
Well,
right?
that's part of how Newton
What?
discovered.
Sorry.
That's part of how Newton became a theist, because he realized that this all couldn't be an accident.
That's who became Newton.
So right.
Right.
He realized this whole thing couldn't be an accident.
What was an accident?
It's great.
He realized the world couldn't be an accident. Al Kapanim, you think into I mean, you're talking about the heavens and the skies, but today you don't need to take a telescope and look in the heavens. You can take a microscope and look at anything. The human body has the average human body has around 40 trillion bacteria in it. To give you an idea, and cells. It's just and to think that everything, this is nothing. This world is nothing. In other words, then because there are higher worlds and higher worlds, and this world is nothing compared to the higher worlds. And every world is 500 years removed above and higher than this world. And that all leads to an incredible Yiras Hashem. Thinking about, the Rambam talks about this in the first Prakim of Rambam, thinking about the greatness of Hashem. But in the earlier Prakim, we were talking about thinking about the greatness of Hashem based on looking around in our world, or considering how Hashem is present in our world. That's Yirat Hatah, says the Alter Rebbe, in a way of Gadlus. Gadlus of Yirat Hatah is when you think about not only this world, but how
Expansively.
everything, right? You take into consideration all of creation, not only the physical creation, not only the physical universe, which in itself is mind-blowing, but realizing how all that is absolutely nothing compared to what's going on in terms of all the higher worlds and the spiritual creations.
So how human being cannot believe in Hashem if he knows the body is billions of billions thing?
And the only
It's
answer,
stupid not to believe.
yeah. And that's why Hashem gave Bechira Chavshis. Right? We talk about Hakel, Hagodel, Hagiber, Vahanoira. So what does Hagiber mean? The Rebbe talks about this in Sharichud V'Hamunah. Hagodel means Hashem's greatness, and that he was in all. Gedula refers to L'chasham. Gedula refers to Maise Bereshis. Gedula refers to Hashem's incredible chesed in creating everything. And what's Gevura? What's Hashem's Gevura? Gevura means discipline, means restraining. That's what Gevura. Gevura is that with all of Hashem's Gedula, he was able to create a situation wherein his own creatures, his own creations can deny his existence. And says the Alter Rebbe, the Gevura is just as great as the Gedula. Wow. Now you think that the Gedula is, the Gevura, the ability to be able to create a world of this sort, and that you should have creatures walking around and saying, is there is there a creator? That's just as great as the entire Gedula, as the entire creation. And that's something which is from the power of Hashem. But actually, I once had the opportunity, I was speaking once, this goes back many years, I was speaking to a doctor who became a Baal Tshuva. And he was telling me, at the time, that he doesn't understand how he was able to go through medical school without believing in Hashem or understanding that, after he became from, he says, now I look at everything like, how do people go through medical school and remain professed atheists? It makes no sense. That makes no sense. But that's Bechira Chavshis. Afal Pikain, nevertheless, Nikra Yirazu, this Yira, even the Yira which is godless, it's called Yira Chitzonius, it's called an external Yira, Vitata, on the lower level of Yira. Even the godless of Yira Tata, we're all talking about the lower level of Yira. Mi Achar, why? Shenem Shachas, because where does this Yira come from? Meha Oilam is from Hashem's relationship with the world, with creation. Shehem, and all of these creations are only levushim shel hamelech hakadosh baruch hu. They're only the garments of the king. Asher mistater u'misalem u'mislabish bahem, that Hashem hides and conceals himself and enclothes himself within them. Lachyoisam, and he gives them life. U'lekaimam, and he gives them existence. Lias yeshmi ayin v'chulu, that they should remain. They should be something rather than nothing. Rak, however, shehi hashar v'hapesach lakim ha'teir v'mitzvahs. Nevertheless, this is the doorway, the entryway to Torah mitzvahs. Yirat Hatah is absolutely necessary in order to be able to do Torah mitzvahs properly. And that's what the Mishnah says, going back earlier, im ein yira ein chachma. If you don't have yirat hata, then you Torah mitzvahs you can't do. In other words, even if you do the mitzvah, but you're missing the essence of the mitzvah, the kedusha of the mitzvah, the avodas Hashem that's within the mitzvah. So again, within yirat hata, there are many levels. From the lowest level of thinking, like Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai said, remember we spoke about in Perek Mem Aleph, Halavai sheyehi Maire Shemaim Aleichem K'Maire Basar V'Dam. That's also yirat hata. The lowest level of yirat hata is that just like if someone is watching me, I don't do something inappropriate, I know Hashem is watching me. That's yirat hata. It's the lowest level. And then there's then there are many levels in between. And then you get to the highest level of yirat hata, the godless, when you contemplate all of creation, including the spiritual worlds. But still, all of that is yirat hata. Why? Because you're arriving at yiras Hashem, not by understanding or feeling Hashem himself, but by virtue of his actions and by virtue of his deeds. And that's why it's called chitzonius. It's called a yirah chitzonius, an external fear, because all of this comes from that which is external to Hashem. I'm not thinking about Hashem, so I'm saying, wow, look at what Hashem created. Look at what Hashem has done. And therefore it's all called yirat hata. However, a yira ilam, higher level of yira, which is yari boishes, as mentioned earlier, it's a fear that's characterized by busha. And by busha, there isn't I know the classical translation of busha is shame. But it's not a very good translation, especially today, the word shame has a negative connotation to it.
Embarrassment.
What?
Embarrassment.
It's embarrassment.
It's better. Embarrassment is better.
Boishes means a complete bittul, complete. I'm embarrassed of who I am, but not because I did anything wrong, but a complete insignificance. A yira which leads to a person feeling completely
No self-image.
nothing, absolutely nothing. The yira pnimis, and this is a yira pnimis, this is an internal fear. Why? You're not thinking about the worlds, but you're thinking about the lakus, the godliness that's within the worlds. Allah amru. Regarding this, they said, Im ein chachma in yira. That in order to reach the higher level of yira, in order to reach the level of yira law, you need chachma. And we'll get into what chachma is in a moment. So here the Alter Rebbe doesn't elaborate it very much, but in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe did a Siddur, wrote a Siddur, and aside from the fact that there's a Nusach Atfilah there, there's also different things the Alter Rebbe wrote in the Siddur, different instructions and different places. So there's a very long ha'ara note that the Alter Rebbe writes by Tikkun Chatzos, and over there he references Perek Mem Gimel and Tanya and says, I want to give a little more explanation about what I was talking about in Perek Mem Gimel and Tanya. And he says that imagine the yira that a person has when you are in the presence of a tremendous chacham or tzaddik. So imagine if you were in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu, or the Rambam, or the Baal Shem Tov. Imagine what you would feel like. The yiras boishes, the utter insignificance that you would feel, and that is yira ilah. That is the highest level of yira. And the Alter Rebbe contrasts that. He says that's different than the fear, and we say again the fear, the awe that you would feel when you're in the presence of a king. In which way is it different? In which way is it different when you're in the presence of a tzaddik? Is the awe different than when you're in the presence of a king?
King can kill you.
The king can kill you. That's not about the awe. That's about you're worried about your own skin. That's true.
My own skin.
Yes, Father.
What?
Yes, Father.
So how would you fear the king?
What makes you, well, let's talk about a king for a second. Not all kings are the same. Not all kings are equal. One king you'll have more fear of, more awe of, more reverence for. And another king you'll have a lesser fear, awe, and reverence. What makes a king great? What makes one king greater than the next?
Benevolent. The king is benevolent to his subjects.
So you will fear him more if he's more benevolent?
I would respect
If it's
him
more
more.
tyrannical, you'll feel more.
Okay, so
What not that you're feeling
okay, but
about yourself.
we're getting also lost in the word fear. When we're talking here more about and as we discussed in the past, the word yira means awe, reverence, right? What makes one king command more awe and reverence than another? So On a very simple level,
A benevolent.
let's talk about presidents for a second, okay? Because today we don't really have that
They're
kings.
not worth 2 cents.
Okay, so let's say,
We haven't had in the last half century, really.
right. So how would you compare if you had the president of the United States, the president of Russia, alongside the president of Finland and the president of Luxembourg? So which one would have more, would evoke in people more awe and more reverence?
The one who's more powerful.
How do you define power?
Military strength.
Military strength, so that's one thing, right? But also the one that has more territory, that controls more people, and more power means
More money.
more people that fear them, right? So what's interesting is that who the king is himself, whether he's a nice person or not a nice person, or a wise person or a fool, really doesn't play into it so much. What makes one king greater than the next, and what makes you have an awe for the king, is
His power over you.
right. So that's why the block president, the president of the block association, we don't have that much yira for him. I don't know if we have presidents of block associations here in Brooklyn, but the point remains. So when you fear a king, it's not really about the king's personality. It's not about the king's personality. The king's personality is almost irrelevant. Yeah, if the person's a dictator, a tyrant, you'll fear him. But I'm talking about, again, if we move away again from the definition of fear as in trembling because I'm scared of the king, and more in terms of the reverence and the awe, the Maire, it's not about the personality of the king and the qualities of the king, but it's more about how much territory does this king control, how many soldiers does this king command, how many nuclear weapons does he have in his arsenal, etc. As opposed to when you're in the presence of the tzaddik, your awe of the tzaddik is not because of what he can do. It's not you're in awe because you fear that he can, strike you down with a bolt of lightning. Maybe he can, but that's not the point. That's not where the Maire comes from. The Maire comes from him. And by the king, the Maire is not from him, it's from what he controls. Understand the difference?
It means his chachma, his wisdom.
It's the person's kedusha, it's the person's chachma, right? It's the person himself that's causing you to have Maire, as opposed to by the king. It's not for example, if the king were to be stripped of all his power, would you fear the king?
No.
Nothing. So it's not the king himself. It's his actions, it's what he controls, it's the people and the lands and right?
Rabbi, we had Yichidut, my wife and myself, with the Rebbe. We're sitting here in the Rebbe here, we couldn't look at his face. We're like a fire. I have to put my eyes down. It's not the fear of him, fear from his being there.
So that's a Yira Ilah and Yira's Baishas. So Yira Ilah and Yira's Baishas. And when you're in front of a real tzaddik, does it make a difference how many chassidim he has? That's not, the fear is from the person himself, yeah. The same thing that the Rebbe is saying is true about regards our Yiras Hashem. There are two types of Yiras Hashem we can have. There's one type of Yiras Hashem is like we fear Hashem like we fear a king. So how does one have that type of fear of Hashem? Look at all the worlds that Hashem created. And now Hashem fills all the worlds and He surrounds all the worlds and He's within all the worlds and He controls everything. And the incredible amount of things that He created. But that's not Hashem. It's not Hashem. That's like when you fear a king and the more lands He controls, you fear Him more. And then there's a higher level of Yira, which is like the Yira of the Chacham. And my fear and awe of Hashem is not because of what He's done, but because of Hashem Himself. When I understand that in actuality, all of creation is nothing. Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah, I think we mentioned this in the past, with all of the greatness of this world. And as the Medrash tells us that if all the wise people in the world got together and they decided that they wanted to create a fly, a mosquito, they couldn't do it. They couldn't create a mosquito and make it alive. So you know what? If you want to talk about the greatness of Hashem, you don't have to look at a mosquito. You don't have to look up to to the stars. But with all the greatness of the world, all the grandeur of this world, and then once again we have not only this world, we have all the higher worlds, the spiritual worlds that talks about in Chassidus and Kabbalah. So says the Alter Rebbe that all of this, imagine if Hashem had to apply for a job somewhere and he had to write up a resume, it wouldn't make it on his resume. It wouldn't make it on his resume. That's how insignificant all of creation is to Hashem.
But how would you define?
Take a moment to digest that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't. Okay, I'm obviously paraphrasing. The Alter Rebbe doesn't use the word resume, but the Alter Rebbe says that the whole creation of the world, that's not the main thing by Hashem. It's incidental to Him. It's not. It's not something that Hashem is so proud of. It's all incidental to Him. So when our Yiras Hashem comes from our Rizbaininus, our contemplation of Hashem's greatness. But what is Hashem's greatness? All the worlds He created, at the end of the day, that's a Yirah Chitzainis. It's a Yirah Chitzainis. It's external, because all of this is external to Hashem. It's not Hashem Himself. Whereas a Yirah Pnimis, the Yirah Ilah, the higher level of Yirah, is contemplating exactly this, contemplating how everything is nothing to Hashem. Contemplating about Hashem Himself, how He is beyond and transcends the world. And not that Hashem's greatness is because of the world, because the world is actually nothing. And all of creation is actually nothing. And Yirah Ilah and Yirah Tata, it's not only a matter of a different avenue how to arrive at Yirah. I can arrive at Yirah by thinking about how Hashem is present in creation and the greatness of creation. That's one way. And another way of arriving at Yirah is by contemplating that Hashem is completely above and beyond. It's also something different. And that is, as we mentioned earlier, that Yirah Ilah is also known as Yari Boishas. Why is it called Yari Boishas? When you are standing in front of a king, do you feel yourself to be utterly insignificant? No. You can't be utterly insignificant. You know why you can't be utterly insignificant? Because the king doesn't view you as insignificant. What's the proof the king doesn't view you as insignificant?
That he's seen you.
What?
That he's seen you.
Okay. The wise person also sees you. The tzaddik also sees you. But it's a difference. And that is, if you didn't exist, then the king is a lesser king. Because what makes a king, as mentioned earlier, what makes a great king? That he controls subjects. So we can't say that the people, the subjects, are nothing in relation to the king, because the king needs you. You have to be somewhat significant. And therefore, that reflects itself in the fact that when you're standing in front of the king, and you do have your awe and your reverence and your Maire and everything, but it's not a Maire, it's not a Yirah that leads you to feel completely insignificant. Whereas when you stand in front of this great Hokum, when you stand in front of this great tzaddik, you feel yourself to be mamish nothing. Relative to the tzaddik, you're mamish nothing. Because let's think about it. Is the king really greater than me? No, he just controls a lot of people like me, right? So I can't feel utterly insignificant in the presence of the king. But when I'm in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu, what am I? I'm mamish nothing. That's a Yireh Boish. It's not only that the meditation is a different meditation, it leads to a different type of Yirah. It leads to me to feel totally insignificant, totally mamish nothing. And that is Yireh Ilah. How do we arrive at Yireh Ilah? That's what we have in the Mishnah, Im Ein Chachma Ein Yirah. The second part of the Mishnah is, in order to have Yireh Ilah, you need to have Chachma. What is Chachma? So let's look inside. Second, Allah Amru, around 12 lines in the bottom. 10 lines in the bottom. Allah Amru, regarding this level of Yirah. Chazal tell us, Im Ein Chachma Ein Yirah. The Chachma, he koyachma. Chachma, if you take the letters of the word Chachma and you transpose them, it spells koyachma, the faculty of ma. What is ma?
What?
Ma is what? Bittul. Moshe Rabbeinu said, Vanachnu ma. What are we? Right? Ma means the idea of bittul. V'ha-chachma, the pasuk tells us, V'ha-chachma me'ayin timatzei. Chachma comes from ayin, from nothingness. Ve'ezo chacham, And the Mishnah tells us who is a Chacham, Harayas Hanoilad, the one who sees,
The future.
who can see the future, who perceives. What does it literally mean? A Hanoilad, that which is born. I mean, the Pashup Pshat means who can see the future, but Harayas Hanoilad means that. So we have over here, we have 3 points that Rebbe just made about Chachma, one after another. Chachma is Koyach Ma, which means that Chachma is related to the idea of Bittul. And then he brought down the Pasuk, V'chachma me'ayin tamatzeh, which means that Chachma comes from nothing. And then the Maire Azal, Ezohu, Chacham Harayas Hanelad. Who's a Chacham who sees that which is born? Now the Rebbe is going to explain how all these 3 are actually saying the same thing. They seem to be 3 different ideas about Chachma, and all these 3 really are saying the same thing.
Maybe this is the reason Sfaradim with the make Ashkava, they say V'chokhmah me'ayin timatzeh. This is the beginning of the Ashkava. Ve'ezu mekom deha, I think, to stay and continue. Maybe that's the reason.
I don't know. I have to see the Nusach, I don't know, but it's possible.
Now I'm looking for it.
Pirush, what does this all mean? What does it mean that a Chacham is Rayas Hanoilad? It means Shiraya Kol Davar, that whenever the Chacham looks at something, whenever the wise person looks at something, the person who has Chachma sees Eich Noilad V'nishava Me'ayin Liyesh. He sees how at this very moment it is being born and recreated from nothing into something. So HaChachma Me'ayin Tematzeh means that Chachma, wisdom, comes from nothing. What does that mean that wisdom comes from nothing? Wisdom comes from wherever you're looking, whenever you're looking, realizing, understanding that everything that you are seeing is essentially emerging from nothingness at this moment, which is the same idea as Haraya Sanoilad. Again, Chachma Me'ayin Tematzeh means where does wisdom come? From seeing. A wise person is a person who sees the ayin, sees that everything is literally emerging from nothingness at every moment, because Hashem is recreating everything, me'ayin liyesh,
Yes, right.
creating me'ayin liyesh, creating from nothing to something at every single moment. And that's Rayas HaMeilad. He looks at everything and says, oh, it was just born, it was just recreated.
That's not a chitzonis.
And that, as we continue, you'll see where we're going with this. And that leads you to Chachma, that leads you to Koyach Ma. The ultimate bittul comes from, the ultimate bittul to Hashem, Koyach Ma, comes from the ayin, comes from the Rayas HaMeilad, comes from seeing how everything is emerging from nothingness at all times. So again, the Chacham is the one who sees, Shiraya called Davar sees within everything, how it is being born and created from nothing to something. B'dvar Hashem, through the word of Hashem, v'ruach piv yisparach, and the breath of Hashem's mouth. K'meshekosov, as the pasuk says, u'beruach piv kol tzavam, that all the hosts of heaven, how are they created? Through the breath of Hashem's mouth.
How do you see that?
V'ilazah, it doesn't mean to see it with...
No, but I mean to say, how do you...
just like in the simple pshat, Harayas Hanel, that means you see the future, it means that you see it. In the mind's eye, in the mind's eye.
What's that again?
In the mind's eye, in the mind's eye. Meaning, one second. So what does this mean? Because this is something, we've discussed this once in the past when we were learning Perek Chaf in Tanya, and it's discussed at length in Sheikhid V'Amunah. And this is something which is one of the foundational ideas of the Baal Shem Tov, based on something that it says in Medrash Tilim. The pasuk says, "Lo olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim," which means that David HaMelech says to Hashem that forever your word
Shema.
is nitzav. It stands, it remains in the heaven. So the Medrash says on this that dvarcha Hashem marta, that David HaMelech is saying those words that you said, Yehi Rakia, the words that Hashem said 5,779 years ago. He said Yehi Rakia. So Dvarcha Nitzav Bashamayim, those words are still in heaven today, and they are keeping the heaven in existence. Because, as the Baal Shem Tov explains, if the Dvar Hashem, if the words of Hashem, of the Asarim Amaris, of the 10 utterances, and there are many different Chilufim and Tmuris and Gematrias, in other words, every single creation in this world has in it either one of the Asarim Amaris or a various it's called Chilufim and Temuris, and the permutations of the words. And those words constantly have to be within them, because if those words, Hashem's words, were to leave for one moment,
We saw of
The whole world.
The whole world would cease. It would cease to exist. Right. Right. In other words, if Hashem didn't want something to exist, what would He do?
take away the
Right.
what's in Hashem.
So someone who isn't familiar with that, okay, Hashem would burn it. If Hashem doesn't like the people in the world, He brings a mabul, right? But Hashem doesn't have to do anything. To the contrary.
Pull the plug.
To the contrary. Hashem has to do something for them for something to continue to exist. So the question, what does Hashem have to do if He wants to get rid of something, is a silly question. He just has to stop doing. Not He has to do something to the extent, right? That actually there's a whole Maire in this week's parsha where the Rebbe asks, what's this whole mabul all about? The Eibishter didn't like the people. He should have gotten rid of them. What if to make this whole show and this whole flood for 40 days and destroy everything? As the pasuk says, but that Moshe told Pare that what's the lashon, that I would have put my finger. Hashem said, I would have put my finger in you. Vatichokeid min haaretz, you would cease to exist. And that's why the Alter Rebbe says that the whole mabul was like a mikvah. The point of the mabul was like it was water, like a mikvah. It was for 40 days, like the 40 saw of the midbar, which came to be metaher the world. Because the world was corrupted, actually the physical world was corrupted and needed a mikvah to purify it. But that's based on this principle, which is that everything is being recreated every moment from Hashem. Hashem doesn't need to bring a mabul to destroy people. The example is brought in many places in Chassidus about this. There are two examples. One example is of Kriyas Yamsuf. We know that it says, the pasuk says that Hashem brought a wind, a ruach kadim aza, an easterly wind, and it pushed up the water and made the water like a wall. And what were to happen if for one moment the wind would stop blowing? The water would have collapsed back. So the same thing is also, the words of Hashem are like the wind, and the words of Hashem are constantly forcing the world into existence, because essentially what is the world is nothing. It's not something from something. And if you take a piece of silver, like the Alter Rebbe says, and you mold it, and you shape it, and you make a cup out of it, a becher out of it, right? So then the silversmith puts the becher on the table, and he walks away, and the becher continues to exist. It doesn't need the silversmith anymore. Why is that? Because the silversmith didn't create it. The silversmith just fashioned it. It's something from something. Yesh miyesh. So yesh miyesh doesn't need to have what's called the koyach hapoyel benifal. It doesn't need the koyach of the actor within to keep it going. But yesh mi'ayin, if for one moment, like if the wind would have left, the whole thing would have collapsed. Or another example that's brought down, the Alter Rebbe brings down, is if you throw a rock, how long is the rock going to stay in the air? As long as your energy keeps on pushing it. The moment that your energy leaves, it falls. The same thing is Hashem put into creation, and only as long as Hashem's energy remains within it does the world continue to exist. But this leads us to another conclusion, which is, does the world really exist?
Yes, Ratzon Hashem. Depends on Ratzon Hashem.
So let me ask you, let's say you're walking one day in the street and you see a rock flying past you. Do you look up at it and say, wow, a flying rock? I never knew there were rocks that can fly. Is that what you would say?
No, I say so. I would say someone threw it.
Who's the idiot who threw that rock, right? Because rocks don't fly.
Rocks don't fly.
And in fact, even when the rock is passing by you in the ear, is it a flying rock? No, it's not a flying rock. It's the same rock as every rock on the ground. It's a rock that's being flown by a person. The rock is not a flying rock. Hashem exists. Do we exist? Do the worlds exist? No, we don't exist. Hashem is existing us. In other words, the quality, we can't say that that this is something which the Rambam really talks about in the very beginning of Rambam. The first halachas of Rambam, the Rambam talks about it. He says that is there a Rambam around there anywhere? Quick, over here.
He would know.
Amada.
They have Rambams here too.
Thank you. Every Lubavitch library has their Rambam.
Maybe life.
So the Rambam, the very beginning of the Rambam, he says, you say this Vamud HaChachmas, the foundation of all foundations, and the pillar of all wisdom is laid out to know Sheyesha Matzirishin, to know that there is an existence, a primary existence. V'hu Mamtzi Kol Nimtza. He gives existence to every existence. By the way, note, he didn't say V'hu Himtzi Kol Nimtza. He didn't say he gave existence to, he gives existence to all. Everything in heavens and earth in between, like nimtzu elam mitzvah matzeh, only emerge and come from, have mitzias from amitas matzeh, from the truth of his existence. And then he continues and says, "Who shall?" And I'm skipping to halach dal. Who shall navi emer? This is what the navi says: Hashem v'Hashem elikim emes. That Hashem alone is true. He alone is true, and nothing else has truth like his truth. This is what the Torah says: there's nothing other than him. Meaning to say, there's nothing that truly exists other than him. In other words, Hashem truly exists. He exists because he exists. We don't really exist. We are being existed. In other words, we're being put. So that's the bittul. We're talking about koyach ma. When a person thinks into this idea of reyes hanoiled, chachma ma'ayin tamatzeh. In other words, person realizes that at every moment we are being forced into existence by Hashem. Therefore, if so, the heavens and the earth, and everything that's within them, we're absolutely bottled. We're nothing. We're absolutely nullified to the words of Hashem and the breath of his mouth. We're mamish nothing. We're mamish nothing. So again, in the first mode of Yira and Yira Tata, and this goes to answer the question that you asked. What's your name?
Yeah,
Reb Shalom. In the first type of his body, you think, wow, the world is so big. The world is so great. And not only this world, you have the Rakia and the between the Rakia and the Chais. Look at all this incredible universe, incredible creation, all made by Hashem. And this mode, you're saying, the worlds, they're nothing. It's actually an opposite meditation. It's an opposite isbaininus. The world's nothing. It's all of it. You're thinking about Hashem because the worlds are absolutely nothing. The first mode of isbaininus again is like by a melech. What makes the melech great? Not the melech himself. What makes the melech great is all the lands that he controls. This year, there's a higher level of year. It's not about the lands Hashem controls. We're thinking that the worlds are nothing. And this is the ultimate bittul, when you realize you're nothing. Not like in the first type of level of, you're saying, wow, the worlds are so great. You know what, if the worlds are so great, I'm also something, because I'm part of the world. Think about that. If Hashem is great because he created the world, I'm part of the world, so Hashem must be proud of the fact that he created me. But if I realize, no, the worlds are nothing, and I am nothing, that leads to an incredible chachma, koyach ma, an incredible bittul. And then the Alter Rebbe continues. The Alter Rebbe says, he's given another mashal. He says that we are nothing ki bitul oir v'ziv Hashem esh beguf Hashem esh atzma. And this is what's all talked about in Sheikh's Vamuna. You have the light of the sun. The Alter Rebbe is, we're taking this a step further. The light of the sun, does it exist? Also, not really. If the sun were to go away, if the sun were to be extinguished, or when the sun sets, there is no light of the sun. It isn't a mitzias. It isn't a real mitzias for itself. It is simply an expression of its source. So the light of the sun is absolutely batal to Hashem. In fact, in Chassidus, when we talk about the energy of Hashem, we call it oir. There's a reason why we call it oir, because just like oir is completely batal to its moir, completely nullified. It isn't. All it is an extension of an expression. It has no identity. It has no self. It's simply an extension and expression of its source, its light source. The same thing is the Oyer of Hashem. But here the Alter Rebbe says that all of creation is kibitul Oyer v'ziv Hashemesh, is like the bittul of the light and the radiance of the sun, big guf Hashemesh atzma, while it's within the sun. In other words, if the rays of the sun extend outside of it, then obviously within the sun, there's also, within the orb of the sun, there is those rays also. Did you ever look at the sun? I hope you don't look at the sun anyways, but imagine looking at the sun and saying, oh, look at the sun, look at the rays of the sun inside there. No. Within the sun, there is no place for anything else. The bittul over there, even though that the rays of the sun, even the rays that extend outside of the sun, are buttled to the sun, but even a greater and higher level of bittul is the Oyer v'ziv Hashemesh, is the light of the sun, while it still remains within the sun. So this is a higher level of bittul. Not only because when something extends out of its source, even if it's utterly dependent on its source, it's still something. I look out the window, I see sunlight. Even though that in truth it's really buttle, but it seems to be something. But when it's within its source, there it's mamish nothing. We are within our source. We have not separated, we have not gone out of the Dvar Hashem. We are within our source. So our bittul is even more than sunlight which comes out of the sun. It's even more than when you throw a rock. Our bittul is like the bittul of the sunlight which is still in the sun. And now comes the hardest part of the Perek. You ready for it? The next two lines. The most difficult part of the Perek. And don't exclude yourself from this principle. You too, or I should better say me too. I also, me and my neshama, my guf, I'm also betil b'mitzias b'dvar Hashem. I'm also bottled b'mitzias, absolutely nothing to the and bottled to the dvar Hashem, the words of Hashem, v'dibura period, b'dvar Hashem. In other words, it's very nice when we have this whole contemplation and you think about how all the worlds are nothing. And sometimes you have to stop and say, yeah, that means me also. It's not just all the world, not just this world, not just all the world, but me too. And that's the hardest because we are the biggest mitzias in our own eyes. To be bevatel, to say the whole world is nothing is einzach, but to say that I'm nothing, that's a much more that's tougher, right? V'diburi yisbarach miyuchad b'machshavti chulu. Okay, now Alter Rebbe is going to take it even further. It's going level after level after level. The first level Alter Rebbe said was that we're completely batel Hashem. Why? Because we're completely dependent on Him for existence. We have no real existence of our own. We don't have no independent existence. Then the Alter Rebbe says, even more than that, our bittul Hashem is like the rays of the sun, essence within the sun. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to say even deeper. Until now, we're entire time we're talking about the yachas of creation, the relationship to its source. What is the source of creation? The Dvar Hashem, the Asar B'Amaris, Hashem's words. Dvar Hashem, V'ruach Piv, the words of Hashem. So we're completely bottled to our source. But when our source looks at us, does our source think that we are significant?
Yes.
What's the proof?
He has a relationship with it.
What's the proof?
There is a Torah, mitzvahs.
The proof is that it's our source. It created us. In other words, can we say that we're completely insignificant to the Dvar Hashem? We're bottled b'metzias, we're talking nothing. We have no independent existence of our own. We don't really exist. But whatever there is, whatever we are we utterly insignificant relative to the Dvar Hashem? If we were utterly insignificant, why would He be creating us? So then the Alter Rebbe takes this further. And by the way, we're doing this very, very, very briefly here. This idea we talked about at length in Perek Chaf of Tanya. So if you want to have a better grasp of the concepts we're going to be talking about now, you can go back and you can look or listen to the Shiurim on Perek Chaf of Tanya. There the Alter Rebbe explains that in the human being there's a whole chain. And there's Dibur, the person speaks. Above Dibur there's Machshava. The source of Dibur is thought, is Machshava. The source of machshava, what is the source of machshava? Is seichel and midas. The source of a person's thoughts are a person's intellect and a person's emotions. How significant is one utterance that a person says relative to the person's intellect or emotions? Utterly insignificant. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to say, "V'diburi yisbarach miyuchad b'machshavtechu." Hashem's dibur is miyuchad with his machshava. With canal Perechaf v'Chavalef, as we discussed earlier in Perechaf, and Chavalef barichas at length. B'derech mashal, by way of example. Menefesh ha'adam, by way of example of the nefesh of a person. Shadibur echa midiburi machshavtei, that one dibur that a person says, one utterance, one saying that a person says, or one thought, is kilei mamash chulu, is absolutely insignificant compared to the essence of the soul, the seichel, the midas, the essence of the soul. And therefore, all of this world, we're all batal b'mitzias to Hashem's dibur, the dibur that created us. And that dibur that created us is utterly insignificant to its source, which is the essence of Hashem. All of this leads us to Chachma. And as we will Hashem talk about next year, we'll talk about how the Chachma then leads to the Yira Ilah, the higher level of Yira. We'll finish this off next week, this topic, and then Hashem we move on to the topic of Ahava. Next week already we'll finish Yira Ilah, we'll move on to Ava, and that takes us through Perek Nun. We'll be talking about till Perek Nun. We'll be talking about Avas Hashem and different avenues of Avas Hashem. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.